この番組はアニメやミーのご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。Today's video is about Otaku and the community that sprung up out of the anime fandom. This here is Anime Amino, an Amino community that sprung up out of the anime fandom. In fact, with Amino, you can spring up about as many groups and communities as you want, so you can talk to people with the same specific interests as you. Share gifts, discuss new episodes of whatever shows you're watching this season. You can even have group discussions about who the best girl in Monogatari is. You can even complain about the new season of Berserk. You can even add me on there, and I promise not to ignore you. Now, on with the show. Otaku. It's become how some people completely define themselves. For years, anime fans have reveled in the otaku identity, proudly flying the banner as they consume Japanese media and spend exorbitant amounts of money on anime merchandise. The archetypical image of the modern-day otaku isn't nearly as stigmatized as it once was. It's no secret that in Japan, the word otaku isn't exactly a term of endearment, and it's very likely that you'll still see a few people shying away from identifying with it. However, it wasn't always like that, and it's pretty fair to say that in modern times, it's probably not going to be like that for much longer. Hello and welcome to Anime Editorial. I'm your host Nino, and today I'll be taking you through the history, etymology, and the various shifts in meaning of the term otaku. As a word, otaku is pretty strange to pin down. It's one of those Japanese words that can be read in multiple different ways. Otaku can be written using the kanji o, meaning you or your in the possessive sense, and taku, meaning home or house. This is a play on the fact that this is where most typical otaku spend the vast majority of their time. Otaku is also one of the multiple ways to say you in Japan, similarly to anata, kimi, omae, or teme, and it's considered a very formal version of the pronoun. There is speculation that the reason for this is that back in the early days of trading geeky commodities, otaku would speak to each other using this formal platonic pronoun. Think of it this way, say I was living in Tokyo, and I had this Gunpla model that a guy in Osaka wanted, and he had a figure that I needed to complete a set. I wouldn't ask to know the guy's life story, I'd want my figure. It would be like a business transaction, hence why I would refer to my business partner with a very formal platonic term. However, there is a much more historically detailed origin point of the term, and that origin is very much tied to two creators named Mikimoto Haruhiko and Kawamori Shoji, the character designer and mech designer of Super Dimension Macross. Both Mikimoto and Kawamori were known for being very formal in interviews and for being very polite and respectful towards fans, and unlike in English, this reflects very clearly in one's speech patterns. Mikimoto and Kawamori attended a private higher institution for learning called Keio University, and being the posh university boys they were prone to using a certain pronoun when talking to people. Yes, they would use otaku in place of anata when saying you. Because the anime they made had gained such a devoted following, their seemingly odd and somewhat snobbish behavior was seen as endearing by the multitude of fans they had amassed. Soon, fans of Macross and later of many other anime began using the term to refer to one another. The term got passed around and became more or less the way that anime geeks of all kinds refer to each other, but at the end of the day, they were still geeks. Geeks have tendencies, and these tendencies are easily mocked. Enter Akio Nakamori, a satirist writer who is known as one of the two sources for popularizing the negative connotation of the word otaku. In his works, he described the basic tendencies that popular culture ascribes to nerds everywhere: unkempt, cliquish, detached from reality, etc. In his writings, Nakamori made light of certain exaggerated traits that most otaku displayed. An example would be in his article Otaku no Kenryuku, where he describes a group of anime geeks he observed at a convention. The fans all seemed so odd. The sort in every school class, the ones hopeless at sports who hole up in the classroom during break, either so scrawny they look like they're malnourished, or like giggling fat white pigs with silver-framed glasses jammed into the sides of their heads. Since there doesn't seem to be a proper term to address this phenomenon, we've decided to christen them otaku, and henceforth refer to them as such. Ouch. However, I said he was one of two. The other is a little bit less rosy. Here's the story of a man named Miyazaki. No, not that Miyazaki, we already covered him. This Miyazaki. Tsutomu Miyazaki. Who's he, you ask? Well, Wikipedia tells you two aliases: the little girl murderer and the otaku killer. To make a long story short, this sick, depraved individual committed numerous murders in the late 80s. During the police investigation, law enforcement found out he was heavily invested in anime fan culture, hence the media labeling him the Otaku Killer, and igniting a moral panic against anime and video games throughout Japan. Sound familiar? The negative connotation with the word has never really gotten cleaned up in Japan. However, it's less tied to the extremes of child murder and more tied to the all-around cultural stigma people usually have for consuming countercultural entertainment, while at the same time not being as socially adept as most other people. This is most likely why Akio Nakamori's writing in Otaku has been the most enduring prose that people refer to as the basis of the cultural stigma against the word. It shouldn't be misconstrued that the birth of the word otaku was also the birth of otaku culture, because that would be patently false. What we now describe as otaku culture has been around for as long as there have been hardcore fans of merchandise-driven anime, which usually points towards when the first Mobile Suit Gundam series was released. Hardcore anime fans have been hosting conventions since the 70s. To give you an idea of what I mean, Otaku no Keniku was published in 1983, Super Dimension Macross began airing in the fall season of 1982, whereas the first ever Winter Comiket was held on December 21st, 1975. A very important segment of the history of the word otaku is its addition to the Western nerd lexicon. There are three noted entry points for the Western spread of the word otaku. One comes from the 1988 anime Gunbuster, which openly referred to fans of anime as otaku. The second would be Gainax's direct-to-video half-anime, half-pseudo-documentary Otaku no Video, which arguably did my job of anime-related social commentary before I was even born. Finally, one of the most notable uses of the word otaku in the West is in the William Gibson novel Aidoru, which is a cyberpunk book about a dystopian future where most of the popular rock stars and singers in the world are all computer programs completely controlled by corporations. Moving on. Earlier I mentioned Otaku no Video, and I think this 2-episode OVA series is largely to thank for planting the seeds of the modern day reclamation of the term otaku. You see, back in the 90s, anime fans in the West were still in the midst of the second Western anime boom. Tons of new fans were being made every day. Tape trading and the early days of manga collecting were basically ground zero for vibrant otaku communities outside of Japan. However, the word itself hadn't been introduced to them yet, so when this OVA hit stateside with its vignettes of hardcore anime fans giving accounts of their escapades into the fandom, the label they did it under became something that wasn't to be reviled, but a mark of pride in the media that they loved. If Otaku no Video was your first ever exposure to the term otaku, you'd probably think otaku were the coolest people in the universe and you and all your friends should be proud to call yourselves one. This is where the divide occurred that started the shift in how otaku were viewed. In Japan, you had a group of people who were entirely aware of the cultural stigma surrounding their pastime based on years upon years of public disdain for otaku. In the West, however, you had a bunch of newer anime fans enamored by Japan who had just learned about the term from an OVA that paints otaku in a more uplifting and positive light. The bigger the Western fandom got, the more people would see the term otaku in a positive light. It's no secret as to why the word got snatched up by Western audiences. People love expressing themselves through their identity, and a lot of people see anime and the anime fandom as part of their identity. In recent decades, we've seen publications like Otaku Magazine, conventions naming themselves Otakon, and sites like Japanita claiming proudly that they're the otaku's companion. We've even had a few video gaming sites that started out with a more Japan-centric focus have these kinds of names, like Kotaku. And let's not forget that there used to be a pretty popular podcast on YouTube with half of their name being Taku. So that sort of brings us to the modern day. How is the term otaku viewed? Well, it's not nearly as derided as it used to be. One could make the argument that otaku culture is a problem causing anime to resort to the same small bed of tropes and plot lines with shows more designed to push merchandise than for artistic merit. However, this video is more about the etymology and uses of the term otaku. Otaku culture and the habits of otaku is another video entirely. As far as I can tell, people still jokingly mock otaku in some contexts, but there isn't really, nor has there ever been a reason to show any disdain for the label. I'm perfectly fine with being called an otaku. Hell, contrary to popular belief, I know quite a few Japanese people who are fine with being called one. Times they are a-changing. Like and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more of my content as it comes out, and don't forget to support me on Patreon if you're so inclined. As always, sayonara minasan, thanks for watching.